Hey church family, this is Christopher Dinnell, pastor here at Urbana United Methodist Church, and I'm here with Gary Schenkel, our lay delegate to annual conference. And if you don't know what annual conference is, being a part of the United Methodist Church, we are part of a bigger church body called the United Methodist Church, and more specifically the West Ohio Conference. There's tons of conferences throughout the world. And then inside of those conferences, there's even districts and divided up into even smaller parts of the conference so you have more connection with local church bodies. And the West Ohio Conference gathers every year, the same time, the first couple days of June, typically, as long as there's not a global pandemic. And they had gathered in person for many years up at Lakeside, up at Lake Erie, and in the last couple of years we met online. But this year, Gary represented our church and went to the conference and had a report to give us and the church body. So Gary, tell us a little bit about annual conference this year.
Okay, well, this is my second one as lay delegate. It's been a real honor to represent our congregation there. And this, of course, was my first one in person because last year was online. Well, that's convenient to have an online meeting. It's also, it lacks something like online church.
Yeah.
You know, online church was great during the pandemic. We were, very thankful we had that.
Yeah.
But then you don't get the connection, and that's what we had this time at the Dayton Convention Center, June 1st through 3rd.
Yep.
And 1,600 people gathered together from all parts of the conference.
Yep.
And so it was great. We got to meet a lot of new people there.
That's awesome.
And also got to meet some familiar faces. See some familiar faces like this guy here.
Jim Lillibridge.
Jim Lillibridge, yes. Got to really enjoyed getting to catch up with him there. That was great.
Yeah.
So, and got to, thankful to meet a lot of new people. But
Yep.
But there's real connection in meeting together, as you know, in church.
Yeah.
So, and that was really the theme of this year's annual conference called Committed, Connected Community. And based on Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 to 25, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching.
Yeah.
And so that was really a great opportunity. As I mentioned, got to see Pastor Jim, and while he was there for Friday of conference, he missed Saturday when they recognized the retiring pastors, and he had said something about having an invitation to Der Dutchman, so perks of retirement.
Right.
So yes.
Well, and Pastor Jim he just retired United Methodist pastor, and he's been in ministry for 40
Yes.
years. 39, I thought it was 39, but 40 years.
40
yeah.
something,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a pretty amazing accomplishment, and along with many others who retired there as well, it's a big deal. And we also had the bishop share, and if you don't know, again, about how our denomination is structured, again, we have a conference, and we're part of the United Methodist Church globally, but we also have these conferences where we have a bishop that presides over them, and then it's broken down to district superintendents who preside over each district, and they all come together to help lead the church forward. And Bishop Palmer, how long has he been at the helm now?
Well, see, I think this is 11 years or something. And
third term, right?
Next year, this will be his final year,
Yeah.
so he'll be retiring after next year's conference. He will preside over next year's annual conference, but soon after that, he will be retiring.
Yeah. So what was the heart of Bishop's address this time?
Well, anyway, he's got a lot of heart in his sermons, and he really puts himself into that so much. And he said at the annual conference, he told the delegates, our calling is to serve this present age, and I can't do this in his voice, but anyway, even if there's a storm in the midst of passing over. And so in talking about a storm, he was referring to the current situation with disaffiliations from the United Methodist Church. And the day before, our delegation approved or accepted disaffiliations that 172 West Ohio congregations had already voted on at their churches. They'd already done that, so this was just a formality then to accept those disaffiliations, though it was difficult, and you could hear that in the bishop's voice. It was, kind of emotional for him too in that moment. And so he asked that we not let this situation, this time in our church, distract us, but to focus on one thing. And he said, we've got one mission: make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And so he added that God calls us, quote, to create a community that's not just us, but a community that looks like the reign of God, where God is really in charge and where everybody matters. I mean, that was pretty moving. And that was Bishop Palmer's address to the annual conference, but it's also, I think, an address to each individual church in the conference, including the Urbana United Methodist Church, that we stay focused, stay on track with our mission here to transform our corner of the world here and to make a difference for the people who are our neighbors here. So yes, to bring them to Jesus.
I appreciate that thought too. I mean, it's really, this is what we've been talking about in our sermon series the last 2 weeks, is just keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. And that's also in Hebrews as well, 12:2. And it's really easy to get distracted by what's going on to the left or to the right. But the moment we forget our primary purpose, which is to reach people, even here, reach people far from God, right? Which is making disciples for the transformation of the world.
Absolutely.
We begin to miss what God is up to and lose sight. And we have to continue to keep our eyes pointed outward and upward to Jesus.
Yes, definitely, yes.
So along with the address, every year there's recommendations for things to be passed and voted on. This year was no different. You want to give us a rundown on what happened voting-wise?
Yeah, there were 9 recommendations this year. 8 of them were approved, but 1 was basically tabled, set aside for further study. And that one was regarding our camps,
Campgrounds.
The West Ohio Conference camps. And the proposal, the recommendation that came before the delegates was to close Otterbein and Widewater camps and maintain Camp Wesley and use the funds from the sale of the other 2 camps to keep that. But the reason this recommendation came is that there are challenges with our camps and retreat ministry. The properties are needing lots of updates. It's getting more expensive to maintain them. There are fewer campers. The number of campers has decreased over the years, and that also it's recruiting staff to keep the camp safe, to maintain, to do all the things that need to be done. To minister the children while also keeping them safe has gotten more difficult. So it was decided then to hold off and then withdraw. So this will be give us more time to look at, or give the group that's working on this more time to study what can be done with the camp properties, and also look at alternatives for reaching our, the future of our church, the children and youth of our church, to help them in their faith development and growth, and other ways we may be able to do that. And so the church is going to be looking out to us for some ideas too, I think. And Bishop Palmer didn't waste any time, because he gave up, he yielded some of his time from his address to allow people from the delegates to step up to the microphone to give their ideas of what their vision is for ministry, for camps, or for just reaching children and youth to reach them better. So I think we'll be seeing some things from West Ohio Conference on that as they progress in the study and looking for
I sure hope so.
Input, I think. I hope so, yes.
Anyway, our children are the future, right?
Yes, anyway, we'll work on keeping everybody up to date on what's going on with that then. And then there were the other 8 recommendations that came up. One was just minor wording changes in the annual conference rules and policies, so pretty cut and dried. Then there's clergy pension and disability plans and health care benefit plans for active and retired clergy. Third one was 2024 equitable compensation recommendations for clergy, which included a minimum salary increase of 2% over last year. Our congregation has been, maintaining over the minimum for sure.
Praise
so
God.
yes, yes. But anyway, they just want to make sure that no church goes under that.
There are plenty of churches who can't. Or
yes,
don't
I know.
as well.
Yes, but we're fortunate here.
Amen.
Yes. And a recommendation to form a West Ohio Annual Conference Committee to educate clergy, laity, and delegates to general and jurisdictional conferences. Yes. On the current situation in the Holy Land, specifically human rights violations against Palestinian Christians. And so the committee's findings will be presented at next year's annual conference on that. Then there was a recommendation that the bishops establish a working group to study and develop a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, seeing what churches throughout the conference can do to help in that, to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050, and that report will be presented next year's conference then too. Then the last three recommendations were all kind of tied into the general conference, which will be held next year, April 23rd to May 3rd. And so these recommendations were first one to create a U.S. regional conference of the United Methodist Church, as well as regional conferences in Africa, Europe, and the Philippines. A recommendation supporting the removal of policies and language related to sexual orientation in the United Methodist Book of Discipline. And then the third and final one, a recommendation affirming that the West Ohio Conference will protect, affirm, and empower LGBTQI plus people.
So the reality is we're always going to be a church for all people.
Right.
And we're always going to be a church that reaches people who are far from God. And that looks like all of us, right?
Yes, that is all of us.
So we got to make sure that as we move forward, that we're a place where we can reach people with the gospel, the heart of Jesus, which is, again, to reach people far from God by guiding faith through service. So in all these recommendations, they may not have a direct impact on each local congregation, and based on context and based on what happens at General Conference as
right.
well. Yeah.
Yes, we don't know what's going to happen.
We don't.
But yes. Okay.
But it is a part of what we do every year at Annual Conference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last was our districts are newly formed.
Right. This was a vote that happened at last year's conference, kind of restructuring the district configuration of the West Ohio Conference, decreasing from 8 districts to 6. And so in that process, we've eliminated the Miami Valley District, which we've been a part of, but now we're part of the Western Lakes District.
Which we know we have some lakes around us.
Yes,
right? It's not completely crazy.
And so there's some different counties that are been brought in with us then that we didn't have in the Miami Valley. But you can, again, you can find out more about what happened at this West Ohio Conference on the West Ohio Conference website. There's a summary, more information. There's videos. You can watch Bishop Palmer's speech. There's the lay leader's speech there. Very good. Also very good. And then you can see like the maps of the new districts and all that. So then lastly, they announced at the end of the conference that next year's conference will be May 30th through June 2nd.
Good deal.
And they don't have a location announced yet, decided yet. Yes. So we'll see. But anyway, I'm sure it will not be online, so that's good. Okay.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, so if you want a copy of this report, we'll have them available printed off, but you can also come and always talk to Gary or myself if you have any questions about conference, and we'll hopefully answer them correctly. So thanks, Gary, for serving our church and serving our conference.
My pleasure, my honor.